Mitchell has his head up, takes the feet. Oh, my! Donovan!
Get that weak stuff out of here!
Welcome to the Junkyard Pod, hosted by Tony Pesta. I'm without both of my co-hosts today. They have abandoned me. Jackson and Corey will be back for the next episode, and it'll be a mailbag. So if you have any questions for us, send them in the comment section. Ask at least one Sam Merrill question if you want Jackson. If you don't want Jackson to lead the show again, or don't if you want him to stay away. But for today's episode, I have a very special guest. Quincy Carrier is joining us. If you don't know him already, you can find all of his work on YouTube covering the Browns and the Cavs. But Quincy, how you doing, man? Thanks for coming on.
Good. This feels like whenever Evan Mobley or Jarrett Allen gets a putback dunk and you're like, oh, he misses it, but Jarrett's got his back. You know, I'm here to get that putback slam in for you while your co-hosts are elsewhere for the week.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. It was perfect timing, honestly. I'm glad we were able to set this up, and we have a lot to talk about. It's really a perfect time in many ways because the All-Star weekend gives us an opportunity to kind of reflect on the year so far. It's not quite the halfway point. I think we're a little bit past the halfway point for the Cavs, but today we're going to recap Donovan Mitchell's impact in Cleveland, the year he's been having so far. We're going to talk about Jarrett Allen's season of redemption, if it is their season of redemption or not. And we'll end it with a very simple question. Is this Cavaliers team as good as it seems? Because they have been rolling. They're hotter than anyone else in the NBA right now. But let's start with Donovan Mitchell. He just competed in his fifth All-Star game, which wasn't the most exciting All-Star weekend ever. But as I said, it gives us a chance to reflect on how he's been playing. So, Quincy, how important has Donovan Mitchell been this season?
He's been like everything. Like we thought the season was over during that point of the year where both Evan and Darius went out. We were like, well, how is this team going to survive this? And I think even at the beginning of that, didn't Donovan get hurt like the first game that both of those guys missed?
Yeah, there was something.
Yeah, and he was always in and out the lineup early in the season, like for whatever reasons. But he stabilized. He's played really good basketball. I think you've done some great work talking about his playmaking being a lot better this year. I think that's definitely true. He's been his best version of himself in Cleveland both years, right? He's been a better scorer, more efficient. And this year is more the same for Donovan. His impact has been incredible. It's silly to me that he's not higher up in the MVP rankings, but I kind of understand it on one level because it's two disappointing playoff outings in a row. And once you get into that cloud, like some guys get it faster than others where their regular season stuff starts to get tainted because of lack of postseason success. Some guys get a long extension on that kind of thing. Like Joel Embiid, like nobody ever talks about playoff disappointment.
He got a huge extension on that one.
Yeah, and then it's funny too which teams get the treatment or not because the Cavs have one bad meltdown in the series, and like they're getting the full on you're not serious treatment, and that's okay. That's what happens once in a while, right? When your team does that, it happened to the Nuggets, but the 76ers have been such a disappointment for so long in the playoffs. Like they have this constant rivalry with the second round, and it's like nobody ever goes, "Oh yeah, man. Don't know if I care about it." The Sixers win a bunch of games in the regular season. Like every year we're like, no, the Sixers are going to do this and this is going to be the year for them. They got James Harden, as if James Harden has been the difference in a second round playoff series more than twice in his career. So it's always interesting to me how like teams get picked and slotted and labeled, and the Cavs have definitely gotten labeled as a team that can't win in the playoffs. You know, it kind of reminds me of how like the Atlanta Hawks or the Milwaukee Bucks before when they had that 60-win team early on in Giannis's run. It reminds me of that. But yeah, this is a good team. Also, Boston almost having 50 wins already, like kind of takes the air out of what the Cavs are doing. But yeah, Donovan, he's been the engine to this whole thing. And for the Cavs, like we would have been happy if the Cavs were at the same spot that they were last year, given everything that happened. They are in a better spot than they were last year, given being at the All-Star break. So, and Donovan Mitchell's been the main culprit of why you could say that that's happened. So yeah, he's been excellent this year. And you know, I hope the Cavs are able to keep him long term.
Yeah, for sure. You hit on everything that I wanted to talk about, honestly. And you even threw in some 76er slander, which I will always get on board with. I like Joel Embiid, and I do trust the process and all that. But, man, that guy, that 76ers team has collapsed basically every year. And it always seems like they get a pass, whereas as you said, with the Cavs, I think part of it is too, like the fact that the Knicks of all teams beat them. Everyone's so ready. So many people want the Knicks to be good for decades now, and they finally got like their one shining moment, and it happened against the Cavs. So I feel like that played a role into it too.
And it's like how it happens matters too. Because it didn't just happen that the Knicks beat the Cavs. They beat the Cavs in the way that New York wanted them to beat the Cavs, which is they dominated them physically and kind of like made them retreat in that last game. And that was a horrible look for the Cavs, right? Especially like Jarrett Allen. And you have a lot of these guys on this team who, you know, they are known for being more approachable than most NBA players are. And I think that also kind of backfired on them and went against them, because now it's like, oh, they're just nice guys. Like they're not going to be able to do what needs to be done in the playoffs, which is something I've seen them kind of try to address this season as well. I mean, we've even seen Jarrett Allen decide he's not going to take this for the likes of Ben Simmons this year.
He picked an easy target, man. If there was anyone for Jarrett Allen to go at, I feel like Ben Simmons was the one. So
I saw this and I was like, you know, there's been a history of him and Ben Simmons. Like Ben Simmons thinks that that's the one dude that he can test is Jarrett Allen, because this happened last year, remember? Like where he tried to test Jarrett, and Jarrett was like, you know what, man, I got to do something because this is unacceptable that he thinks he can test me. Like,
I've compared Jarrett Allen to like he has that golden retriever energy. And if you make a golden retriever angry, like they can get mad. And if you see that, like, you know, someone must have done something messed up. There's no reason the golden retriever should be angry. And if
like
Jarrett
Isaac
Allen
Okoro
shoving people
bench,
to the
like,
ground,
what happened?
Exactly. You have to really cross the line to get Jarrett Allen to shove you. But to bring this back to Donovan Mitchell, again, I agree with everything you said there. I think we are seeing the most complete version of him, whether it be the improved playmaking. The scoring has always been there, but it seems like he's doing it in a more well-rounded way. And he's playing defense this year, which I think he deserves more credit for. I think he's really been exerting himself to the max on that side of the floor, and he's really been the catalyst behind all of their success. I don't want to talk too much about the trade and all that, because people have talked about it over and over again, the trade that brought him here. But I really think if we don't make that trade, this is a team that's probably competing for a play-in spot rather than second seed in the Eastern Conference. So he's just been huge for them.
Can we talk about the trade discourse for a little bit here? Because I don't know what people like people complain about the trade and like, oh, you gave up all of that for Donovan Mitchell. It's like, one, NBA first round picks are very different than most other drafts.
You'll get them back.
Yeah, like you'll get them back, or you get pick swaps or whatever it is. Like usually you don't really care who the Cavs are going to draft if they're playing like picking in like the 20s, like not really outside the lottery. Like people tend to make a big deal of that as if like that is going to matter as much. But it's like also the Cavs traded for Donovan Mitchell, in my opinion, for a very specific purpose that he's truly serving right now, right? Like they wanted to be a team that has some playoff experience, like not just we made the playoffs, whoopee, yay for us, like serious playoff experience. Like we have a home series, all of this stuff. They wanted to make that leap from a team that could not get out the play-in to a team that can get to a regular playoff seed and play in regular playoff series. And they're at that point right now, even through injuries, they're at that point. And yeah, I still hear people talk about how that trade was a failure because he might leave after this year. But I'm like, how much does a player have to do to justify a trade? Because that wasn't a trade to me that suggested that the Cavs need to win a championship with Donovan Mitchell in order for it to make sense. They just needed Donovan Mitchell to play well, and he's been the best he's been in Cleveland, and that's the best argument also to keeping Donovan Mitchell in Cleveland is him playing at a high level, him being on a team that's on a high level, and him this being his best basketball option in free agency or when it comes to trade options or whatever it is, right? So I don't get why so many people hand-wring about I saw somebody try to say that it was worse than the Rudy Gobert trade, and I'm like, how can you make that judgment? Like, that's insane.
I saw people trying to spin that narrative too, especially early on this year when the Cavs were struggling a little bit. But like I've always said, with the way Donovan Mitchell has been playing since he came to Cleveland, I don't think it's championship or bust either. I think that's the wrong way to view it. But overall, like him being on this team has elevated, it has raised that ceiling for them. And it's kind of a matter of like, hey, if Garland, Mobley, Allen, if they're ever going to be those guys who can compete in the playoffs, they better be able to do it with Donovan Mitchell alongside them. If they can't, then we have bigger problems than where Donovan Mitchell is going to go in the future, because he has put this team in a position where they can realistically compete for a conference finals run, maybe even. And so it's like, if those guys aren't able to get to that point, I mean, I know they're still young, so that's why it's not championship or bust or anything, but like, they should start showing some stuff. And I think they have been. We'll get into that and everything. But I do think a lot of times people view it as like, oh, well, if Donovan Mitchell leaves, then we wasted the last few years. But no, this should be, even if he does leave, worst case scenario, these guys just got some really valuable experience competing for the second seed rather than potentially missing the playoffs altogether.
Yeah, and development needs urgency, right? Like the Sixers were trying to develop guys when they were terrible for like a very long time, and it never worked out because if you don't have that sense of urgency, that sense of we're playing for something now, like this is serious, like you need to get in line. These guys aren't going to develop the way that you want them to develop. It's why like so many people have developed at other teams because now they have that sense of urgency. Now it's like, no, I got to get better, right? Because we're going to be playing in the Susie. I don't want to get eliminated by the 7th seed, right? Like that. I don't want that embarrassment on my name, and that spurs people to play better. And I think, if you look at this trade for Donovan Mitchell and look at it independently of the development of other guys on the roster, I think that's a wrong way to view it. And I think some people just tend to look at it in a vacuum. And it's like, nah, like you trade for Donovan Mitchell, you get better. You get more out of Darius Garland because now he knows how to share that backcourt properly. And also like, just how to play in these big moments. Like the one game the Cavs won, it's because Darius Garland really stepped up in the playoffs versus the Knicks. And Evan Mobley, he needs to get comfortable in this spot, playing with this sense of urgency, especially for somebody as relaxed as he is at times. Like, you need that sense of urgency in order to kind of get guys to develop in any sport, right? So you can't just be mid-level to, we're going to make the play and get bounced in the first round anyway. So what really is a sense of urgency? I think that's also something like trading for Donovan Mitchell gave this team and its development a true sense of urgency, which I think is important when it comes to getting guys from, okay, they had a good couple of years to start their career to they need to become star players. They need that sense of urgency there.
Definitely. I mean, even when you look at someone like Okoro or Jarrett Allen, who we'll transition to here in a second, like if this was a team that was competing for a play-in spot or out of the playoffs, they wouldn't have forced Okoro to stand in the corner and shoot 100 threes and become the closest to a 3-and-D guy that he can be. Same with Jarrett Allen. If this team isn't serious about winning, they're not using him operating above the break and him trying to shoot mid-range jump shots. Like, he's not going to be working on developing that because there's no sense of urgency for him to do it. Same thing with Okoro. Like, the situation that they've been put in has forced them to step out of their comfort zone and try and fit what this team needs to win. So I think that's a good way to just transition to Jarrett Allen in general, because after last year's playoffs, I don't think anyone in the NBA was clowned more than Jarrett Allen. Much of it was deserved. Some of it was a bit unfair, but regardless, he has stepped up in the biggest way that you could hope so far. He's been Donovan Mitchell's the driving force, but Jarrett Allen has been right up there with him and leading this charge and helping the Cavs survive all those injuries early on. He legitimately played at an all-star level. Whether or not he got into the game doesn't matter because, I mean, he was really playing like that dude. He was the defensive anchor. He's been showing us a lot of growth on offense. So has this been a season of redemption for Jarrett Allen? What are you seeing from him?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, with Jarrett, the concern for me is always with the pairing of him and Evan. They're tall, but they're not big, right? They're both thinner centers and forwards. So that's kind of the issue with Jarrett that I worry about. I think they have some better pieces than like polishing off Robin Lopez, like off the bench. Like if you run into some bigger opponents, like, eventually when Tristan comes back from this PED suspension, I think that's somebody you could throw at somebody for 20 minutes in a series to try to plug a problem real quick. But yeah, I think Jarrett was a victim of the lack of depth that they had when it came to bigs last year, right? I think that was really the issue for him, is that he was in a mismatch. They really had no solution around it, and he got dominated. And because he's Jarrett Allen and because he's super nice and he's super honest, it's real easy to pick on him when he says something like, oh yeah, the lights were too bright. He's being honest. It probably was a little bit of what happened there, but he became the easy guy to kind of point at. And that's just an unfortunate thing that Jarrett Allen kind of has to deal with. But this year he's really responded from that, right? Because he could have crumbled. And nobody would have been really that surprised because that was almost a crumbling like performance in the playoffs. But he came back and he's playing, the best basketball he's played since he's been an all-star, right? You can argue even better basketball. He's averaging 3 assists this year, which is insane. So he's been excellent. I think this has been a really good redemption year for him. I think he's also like taken the initiative to be a little bit more aggressive too on the offensive side when it comes to like sometimes he would be hesitant to dunk when he had a clear lane or when he had a little bit of a congested lane. He's more willing to take that on. And I think he learned a lot of lessons. Like, I don't look as much as we didn't like seeing Mitchell Robinson box him out and move him around all series. I'm pretty sure he liked it less. And he seems like he responded to it all season by trying to figure out how that cannot happen again. Because for Jarrett Allen, this isn't the first time something like that's happened. Remember when he was in Brooklyn, he went against Joel Embiid in the 76ers, and Joel gave him some work in that series as well. And it's not Jarrett's fault. He's 6'9", 240. Joel is 7 foot 270, really like
Joel's a lot to handle.
Yeah, Joel's a big dude. Like, and Jarrett's not really built for that. He's more of an agile big defender. So it's kind of like an unfortunate mismatch that he got caught up in a couple of times. And, he can only do so much with his physical profile, but I think he's done what he can do to be able to fix that, become a more versatile player on both ends of the field, both ends of the court. My bad. I'm still in football mode. And really be somebody who I'm not concerned about going into the playoffs. And good for Jarrett because a lot of people wanted him to trade Jarrett Allen for nothing. And I was like, yeah, you might want to at the peak of it, I was mad at Jarrett, and I was like, maybe you want to consider getting bigger at the center position if you're going to roll out Evan Mobley, because it's just not a fair matchup sometimes. But I wasn't going to trade Jarrett Allen for nothing because Jarrett Allen was still a productive player. And I think that's what he's proving right now is that he's still a very, very productive player right now. 15, 10, and 3. And, his percentages speak for itself. So he's been a really good player for this team and really held it down for the Cavs in this tough spot. Yeah, him and Donovan really have held it down in a really tough time for this team.
Definitely. I'd say holding on to Allen this summer paid off when everyone got injured, and he reminded us of how impactful he can be. And hopefully he continues to do that. I think it's very, very important that he didn't just crumble after that playoff series, because we've seen star players and even role players have series defining moments like that, or career defining moments like that, where they collapse in a series and they can just never bounce back. Jarrett Allen's number one enemy, Ben Simmons, is a good example of that. Granted, he had a lot of injuries that have plagued the last few years for him, but he collapsed against the Hawks, and it seemed like he never really recovered mentally from that. So for Jarrett Allen, the key, of course, is going to be how he performs in the playoffs. As much as he has been redeeming himself, it is all, whether it's fair or not, it's going to come down to, does he show up in the playoffs? Because if he struggles again, this is all kind of for nothing, right? And that's really the weird position that the Cavs in general seem to find themselves in, where it's like, no matter how good they play in the regular season, nobody's going to take them seriously. Nobody's going to give them credit until they prove it in the playoffs. And so that's where I want to transition to our final question. Is this Cavs team as good as it seems?
The one number that jumps out to me compared to last year is the road record, right? Their road record was, I think, barely above 500, if not below 500. If it was like one game over 500. No, I think it was actually like a game below 500. So their road record was terrible last year. This year, they're about as good at home as they are on the road. So they're a pretty even team both ways. The reason I think that's important is what the road record reflects is how resilient is your team when it comes to being able to win in different ways during the regular season. Because when you have a good road record, that means, okay, you had a bad shooting night, but you were still able to win that game, right? Because that just happens when you have these road trips, these back-to-backs. And that's something to me is like, okay, when everything's not going the way it's supposed to go, they're still figuring out ways to win games. And that's what it really takes in the playoffs. I remember last year they were playing Philadelphia. I think this was like when they were battling for the 3 seed, and it was on ESPN. And Philly just decided we're going to let you shoot threes. We're not going to let you get anything inside. We're just going to let you shoot threes. And the Cavs could not make a three. They could not adjust to that to save their lives. And that was a big problem with them, right? If the things went the Cavs' way, they got some scoring from their guards. If Darius was hot, if Donovan's making threes, they're a very dangerous team. But the second that stops to happen, things start to break down. All of a sudden, those lobs aren't there for Mobley. All of a sudden, Jarrett Allen's not getting open. All of a sudden, all these things that they're relying on don't happen for them. This year, it's different, right? They have spot shooters. They're a much better shooting team than last year. They're still a good defensive team. I think this team is better suited for the challenge of the playoffs. I think JB is better suited for the challenge of the playoffs because they have more pieces to adjust to. Like the bench scoring last year was atrocious almost all season. This year it's a little bit better. You have pieces like Sam Merrill coming off the bench along with Karis LeVert. It's not just like one guy who could score coming off the bench like last year. And like last year we had to polish off like Danny Green in the playoffs. Like it was not a great situation. So yeah, I think this is a good team. Are they going to live up to the expectations if they're the 2 seed in the playoffs? I don't know if they live up to the expectations of being the 2 seed in the playoffs if we just look at it from that perspective. But I don't think the Cavs, even if they are the 2 seed, are going to have 2 seed expectations. They're going to have a team had a really good year, but they are the 2 seed expectations, which is kind of what it was last year, right? Get out of the first round, push somebody in the second round to 6 games, or get out of the second round, get to the Eastern Conference Finals. Anything above that is cookies, right? It's free money. So I think that's really where the Cavs are. I think they are as good as they seem. I think they're a better team, especially when it comes to the postseason challenge, than last year. I just think they still have some issues that exist that are going to be blatant during the postseason, right? When they go up against, if they go up against a Boston or something like that, like they still have those problems. They're still light. They're still light at the center and forward position when they're starting. Tristan's not necessarily like the good answer that you want there, but he's better than like Robin Lopez was last year.
Oh yeah,
so he's at least playable. They still have some things that they need to hurdle, but this is a young team, and it's easy to forget about age in the NBA because these dudes are so young. Like we talk about Jarrett Allen as if he's like 32 and this is what he's going to be.
25.
He's 25, right? Like he's 25. Or people talk about Evan Mobley as if the book is written on Evan Mobley. He's 22 or 23 years old. Like he's so young. All these guys are so young, and this Cavs team is so young. And I think people forget that in the NBA, this thing takes a while. Like the Nuggets were just a fun team for a very long time before they made that run last year. And they were still looked at as a team that you really don't take that seriously because 2020, they've been making the playoffs consistently since like 2020, 2019 with Jokic, and it hadn't happened for them up until last year. Like, it took like 3 years of consistent playoff experience. You look at the Sixers, like the first iteration of them took forever to get to a competitive place, and then they got a second iteration of them, and now they're on their third incarnation of this team, and it's probably going to end the same way that it ended the last few times. Or the Milwaukee Bucks, same thing, right? They were making the playoffs when LeBron was still on the Cavs. They didn't win that championship till 2021. The Toronto Raptors they had a whole thing with DeMar and Kyle, and then they had to get rid of him. Like, we don't know what the incarnation of the Cavs that are ready to compete for a championship going to look like because it's heavily dependent on what Darius Garland continues to look like, what Evan Mobley continues to look like, and Donovan Mitchell, if he's on the team, if he's here, what he continues to look like. But it's all those things kind of factor into what they're eventually going to be. But they're a really good young team right now that shouldn't have championship expectations, but that doesn't mean that they can't have a season that people walk away with having a lot of fun from. And look, every year you're not going to win a championship, but I think there are years where you could take away a lot from what a team does if they do it in a positive direction. And that is some level of fulfilling, right? Like people act like sports, you can't enjoy anything. Like there's like winning a championship and there's nothing else in between, but there's a ton in between. That in between winning a championship
basically
is
all of
what
it.
keeps people going into sports,
Yeah.
right? Because honestly, like if a team won the championship, it's like it's fun for like the first week, and it's like, oh well, we won. And then you kind of like
then it's
relax.
like, can we two-peak? Can we get another one? Like it immediately, the cycle just begins again.
Like the Cavs fans enjoyed that 2016 championship. Then KD signed there. We were mad for like 2 weeks, but we beat them on Christmas. And it was like, all right, man, we still got 2016. Like it's one of those things where it's like, it's not all or nothing. Like this team can achieve a lot and you can feel really good about it. You know, what if they like if the Cavs get in the second round and they do something like they eliminate the New York Knicks? Yeah, we could get beat by Boston in 5 games that next series, and we're gonna talk about that like the miracle of Richfield. Like,
yeah, no, I agree. You gotta enjoy the process, man. That's literally like, listen, we had LeBron James for 11 years. And we got 1 championship out of it. Like, it's just tough to win championships, dude. Like, especially in all sports, really. It's such an impossible thing. If you're holding your team to that expectation every year, I mean, hey, if that's how you want to watch sports, that's how you want to watch sports. But it's just going to be hard to really enjoy it because, especially this Cavs team right here, like, Donovan Mitchell is our best player, and he's 27 years old. That's the same age LeBron was when he finally won his first ring. So it's like, Donovan Mitchell's still young. The rest of this core is still really young. If you're putting those expectations on them this early, you're kind of setting yourself up to just not be able to enjoy this team for what they are, because this has been a very fun iteration of the Cavs. One of my biggest concerns entering the year was that not only would I be disappointed if they were a disappointment, but I would be sad if we had to blow this team up, because I really enjoy the group that they've put together. They're a really fun group, and I want to root for them. Hopefully we'll see. I think the Cavs, I think they are as good as they seem. I don't think that means they're going to win the championship. I think if they can get out of the second round, that would be a huge, huge win. Really, I just want to see them get out of the first round. That's like the bar for me. But, you know, like when you look at basically any advanced metric or whatever, the Cavs, they're just killing it. They look like a title contender. And that's how it looked last year too. I think the difference, and maybe this sounds silly, but I really think if you just watch the games, it just looks completely different. This looks like a team that actually it matches the eye test and the analytics. They're playing a style of basketball that the offense looks more like 2024 than 2007. They're taking threes and they have guys who can actually make them. They're really good on defense, but they're not relying on turning every game into a rock fight. They can take on a Sacramento Kings and beat them in a shootout. They can beat Milwaukee by 40 points. They can really turn it on when they need to on both ends of the floor, which is something I don't think we saw last year.
Yeah, and it's one of those things too where it's hard to describe it, especially for those of us who want to like talk about things in a more tangible sense. But there were times last year where you could see that the Cavs weren't really ready for the type of moments that they were going to be put in, right? Where it's like, okay, there was that Clippers game where the Clippers came back from like 10 points in like 2 minutes. And I was like, oh my goodness. Like we don't understand the sense of urgency right now that we need to be in to close this game out. But then this year, although they did not complete it out, they came very close to winning that game. I forget who it was against, but like recently they had a game where they came back like pretty much in the last minute of the game from down like 7 or 6. And that to me was like, oh, okay, this team like understands it better this year. They get it. They saw what happened to them in the playoffs. They saw what happened to them over the course of the regular season. They're like, okay, what needs to happen for that to never happen again? When are the moments where we're like, this is important. We need to score. We need to go on a run right now, because if we don't, they're going to get hot and we're going to lose our lead, right? Like they kind of understand these things better. They don't blow some of these massive leads that they used to blow last year. So I think just like mentally, this team seems to have a better understanding of where they are and what they need to do and when they need to step up that sense of urgency and step up that intensity and flip the switch. But yeah, I think that's a fair assessment of them. Also, did it make you feel old to realize that 27-year-old LeBron James was a very, very long time ago? Because it made me feel very old to think about. Like when people talk about LeBron being old, I feel so ancient because I'm like, he's always 25, like youngest to get to these point totals, always there. And now he's like legitimately like, what is he? 30,
39.
38,
He's the
39.
oldest player in the NBA. Every time I hear that, it
That's
stuns me.
insane.
Every single time I hear it, it surprises me.
He
I
played
can't
in the
believe it,
league
man.
with Gary Payton.
Yeah. Man, he could be playing with his son pretty soon, man. It's truly wild.
Did you see
It's
like
really crazy.
somebody did a video? I think Dom 2K did a fun video about like guys who LeBron entered the league as like playing, and it was just like all these guys who coached and like you forgot played, like Jock Vaughn. You're like, Jock Vaughn played? Like all of this stuff, and you're like, man, LeBron is ancient. Like he is so old. He's older than like some of the guys who coach in the league now, which is nuts. Like it's nuts to think of LeBron as an old dude and somebody who grew up knowing LeBron as the young phenom. Like it's weird to see him at this point. And it'll be even weirder to see a league without him, because I don't think in my adult remembering life, LeBron James hasn't been a big part of the NBA. Like it's insane to think about the longevity of his career and how long it feels, but short at the same time. And yeah, you're right. The Cavs had him for 11 years. They could only win one championship. But I'd like to remind fans, a lot of us remember that 2018 season very fondly, right? Because of the run he had in the playoffs. It didn't matter that they got swept in the finals that year. You know, the moments that you get throughout the process are important, right? For a number of reasons, for fan reasons, for your reasons. Like we remember this stuff. And it gives us enjoyment. So yeah, I think Cavs fans enjoy the ride. I think this Cavs team is a bit more trustworthy than they were last year, because they're just a better team than they were last year. And you know, I know people are already trying to freak out about like Darius Garland coming back from injury and he's been inconsistent. It's like he's Darius Garland. He's averaged 22 points the last 2 years. He's gonna probably, and like we're gonna look at his last 2 month split and be like, oh, he averaged 22 points. What do we know? He might average 24 because he has to get back to average, right? Like, oh, okay, yeah, Darius Garland really good at basketball. We'll figure that out. Like I'm not really too concerned about that. Evan Mobley has looked pretty good too since coming back. So. You know, this is a good team. I do wonder where you're at with like Evan Mobley's offensive development. Like, are you at the points where you like where would you compare his ceiling to if you had to compare it to another player in the NBA?
Oh man, that's tough. So I feel like I kind of like the Domantas Sabonis comparison because I like the playmaking potential for Mobley. I don't know. He's shooting the lights out from the 3-point line recently, which is like really crazy and like unexpected. So I don't know like what's going to happen there. I think we'll probably see him come back down to earth a little bit, but I always use like free throw percentage as a good indicator, and he's shooting, I think 75%. So there's definitely something there. He has improved as a shooter. We'll see how much that develops, but I don't think the Cavs need Mobley to be like a 25 point per game scorer. I think they have this, at least this version of the Cavs have that covered with Garland and Mitchell. I think really for Mobley, the leap was always going to be a little bit more difficult to see because there's only so many reps that he can get on offense. There's only so much he's going to be able to contribute. But if we see him continue to stretch the floor a little bit, continue to be just, I mean, he's an automatic bucket if you get him the ball in the paint. If you have Garland or Mitchell manage to dump it off to him, it's like an 80% shooter in the paint. I mean, that's as easy of a point as you're going to get. If he continues to shoot from the mid-range well, get himself to the free throw line, embrace contact, I think is one of the big things that he needs to do, especially setting screens. Drives me crazy watching him try to set a screen because he just does not like hitting other people. If he can start doing that, that'll really open up a lot of things for them. So I'm still high on Evan Mobley, especially his offense. I think if he was on a team that had no expectations and he was the main guy, like he was the lottery pick, I think you'd see him average like above 20 points per game. But what do you think? Where are you at with him?
Yeah. It's a weird place because like I think so much of it depends on like how he fills out and develops like as a like physically, right? Because I think he'll be a much better shooter if he's just a little bit heavier. Like he needs that heavier base to kind of finish through jump shots or just finish through contact. Yeah, like I think in his form's fine. Like it doesn't look janky when he shoots it. He just like he's just I don't think he is at the weight he needs to be at to be able to shoot the way that he wants to shoot. And I think he'll get better at that as time goes on and as he gains more weight. I think he's going to be somebody to me that's very similar to Anthony Davis. Like that's where his ceiling is. My screen just cut out because my cat's like
You're good.
headbutting on everything. But yeah, so I think to me the comp for him has always been like kind of similar to Anthony Davis, where like he made that evolution as he got bigger, and stronger, and was able to be a more effective offensive player. I think that's the ceiling for him. And
I like that person.
yeah, like I think that's where he is. I think he also would just always kind of be a streaky shooter too. Like I think that's just gonna be part of his game, where he's never gonna be a consistent knockdown. Like Tim Duncan was like a knockdown elbow shooter, but he's not gonna be that. I think he's gonna always have these stretches where he has like good shooting splits, bad shooting splits, but he'll be a pretty consistent offensive player. And Anthony Davis, if he doesn't get injured, is like one of the best players in the NBA. Like,
so that's a great comparison. I mean, I feel like people undersell it sometimes, but it's like, hey, if Anthony Davis is healthy, that's like one of the 5 best players in the NBA. So, and not to jinx anything, but Mobley's been pretty durable outside of that knee injury. So who knows, man?
Yeah, but Evan Mobley, I've been on an island with that one for a while, where Evan Mobley, Anthony Davis comp, because I think like there were very similar players coming out of college, like super thin, really good defensive prospects. Some like the seedlings were there for him to become an offensive player, but so many people got caught up in the KG stuff because he's skinny, and they got caught up in the Tim Duncan stuff because he's like really relaxed, and I think that kind of clouded how people compare him to things. And then Bill Simmons got out there calling him KG. And once you call somebody KG, you can't come back from that. And KG is like, I think people really like forget how good a young KG was.
Minnesota KG was insane.
Like, I think people are like, oh yeah, he could be like Kevin Garnett. Cause like we just throw out Kevin Garnett comps like it's not. We gave a Kevin Garnett comp to Norland's Noel. Remember that in 2013?
Oh man, that's bad.
Yeah, that was the cop going out for him. And I was like, what is going on? Like I heard Brian Windhurst say this back in the day. And then we throw out that KG cop, and I'm like, no, there's one KG, right? Like KG was a different beast. But I think he's somewhere more lines like AD, which is really, really good. And if he does turn into that, and you have either Garland or you have Donovan Mitchell with him, I mean, that's a championship caliber team. But you gotta be patient. He's 22. He is also in a situation where he can't just be ball dominant, right? So there are things he has to learn. The one thing that like bugs me about him offensively is he don't hold on to the ball well. Like I don't understand why that is. Like
he's got a loose handle.
Yeah. Like does he have smaller hands? Like is this a physical issue or is it like grip strength? Like the ball seems so. Remember Sasha Pavlovich? He seemed to have the loosest grip I've ever seen on the ball. And sometimes like Evan Mobley will have Sasha Pavlovich-esque like turnovers where it's like, he just touched you. Like hold on to the ball.
I think some of it comes down to that not having the frame too. I think a lot of times if you watch him like really closely when he's driving, it seems like he's focused so much on trying to brace for the contact that he like loses, he takes his eye off the ball almost and loses it because of that. So that's definitely like improving that handle and getting a better grip of the ball is definitely an aspect he has to improve. I just want to hit on the Anthony Davis comparison one more time. Because in terms of being a streaky shooter, Anthony Davis is a streaky shooter, but you saw in that 2020 run when they won the championship, he got hot at the right time and that's all you needed. And so I'm not going to put those expectations on Mobley, but it could be a case of like, hey, this dude gives you 16 games in the playoffs where he's just hitting that jump shot. That could make the difference. I mean, that's really what it comes down to when we talk championships. Like, you just got to get hot at the right time. That's why it's so difficult to win these things, because some of it just comes down to luck and hitting your stride when you need it most. And so hopefully Mobley can develop into the kind of player that can put a team over the top like that.
Yeah, he would be the backbreaker, right? Like that's the backbreaker, right? Okay, Donovan's making shots. We accounted for that. We know he's going to make shots. Okay, Darius is making shots. We accounted for that. We're going to make that. But if Evan is making little floats and little jumpers,
if he hits a three from the corner, you're like, yeah.
That's like, okay. It's with like Rashad Lewis when he was with the Orlando Magic versus the Cavs and these conference finals. Like, all right, dog. Like, that's it. Like, we got nothing for that. Like, we knew Dwight was going to go off.
Got to wave the white flag.
Yeah. So I think that's what Evan Mobley's role offensively is to be. I think people look at him in the context of being the number one option on offense. He's not that archetype of player, but what he is the backbreaker, right? Which is like, okay, now he's like going off. We got nothing. We got
Yeah.
absolutely nothing for that. And they're already a tough team to beat when Darius and Donovan, or just one of Darius and Donovan, are going off. So the bones are there for this to be a really good team.
For sure. I agree with that. That's going to do it for this episode of the Junkyard Pod. Thank you, Quincy, for joining the show. I truly do appreciate it. Thank you to everyone for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple, Spotify, or YouTube. And don't forget to drop your questions for the mailbag episode coming soon. But that's it for me. Go Cavs.